working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. The U.S. Navy said its guided missile destroyer, the USS Milius, had sailed through the Taiwan Strait in a freedom of navigation operation carried out days after China staged massive war games around the island. The U.S. and Vietnam said they hope to upgrade diplomatic ties days after a flare-up in tensions with China over Taiwan. And the Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi opens the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, which will focus on the issues surrounding China's growing pressure on Taiwan and Russia's war in Ukraine. And Asia and the Pacific remains a dynamic region despite the somber backdrop of what looks to be shaping up as a challenging year for the world economy. However, the region still faces challenges from inflation, debt, and financial vulnerabilities. The U.S. Navy said its guided missile destroyer, the USS Milius, had sailed through the Taiwan Strait in a freedom of navigation operation carried out days after China staged massive war games around the island. China views Taiwan as part of its territory and has vowed to bring the self-ruled island under its control one day. Beijing launched 3 days of military exercises around Taiwan on April 8, in which it simulated targeted strikes and practiced a blockade of the island. The 7th Fleet shared images Monday on Twitter of crew looking out into the Taiwan Strait, one of the most crucial waterways in the world for international shipping. The ship transited through a corridor in the strait that is beyond the territorial sea of any coastal state. The Navy said, adding that the sail-through demonstrated the U.S.'s commitment to a free and open Asia-Pacific region. The United States military flies, sails, and operates anywhere international law allows. Meanwhile, the United States and Vietnam said they hope to upgrade diplomatic ties days after a flare-up in tensions with China over Taiwan. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. wants to formally upgrade its relationship with the country, in part to reinforce the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific as Washington continues to seek deeper ties with countries in Asia wary of China's rise. Take a look.
As part of our bilateral security partnership, which is growing, we're finalizing the transfer of a 3rd U.S. Coast Guard cutter to Vietnam, complementing a fleet of 24 patrol boats and other equipment, training, and operational facilities that we provided since 2016. All of these efforts bolster Vietnam's capacity to contribute to maritime peace and stability in the South China Sea.
Now, analysts say Hanoi may be more reluctant to elevate relations, worry of upsetting Beijing despite rival claims in the South China Sea. Their neighbor to the north is also a key economic partner. Vietnam's Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh indicated that Hanoi had given the go-ahead for elevating our bilateral ties to a new height. Last year, the Biden administration moved to elevate broader U.S. ties with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations grouping to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The visit to Vietnam is Blinken's first as Secretary of State. He also participated in a groundbreaking ceremony for a new 8-story U.S. embassy in Hanoi. Naval Forces West has announced that joint Philippines and U.S. forces on April 14 have successfully conducted the amphibious raid exercise of this year's Balikatan in Palawan. In a statement on Saturday, NFW Chief Commodore Alan Javier said the exercise was done at the beachhead of Barangay Samariñana in Brooks Point, Palawan. Now, this fleet marine capability was showcased by different units, namely BRP Jose Rizal, the BRP Tarlac, amphibious assault vehicles, the Marine Amphibious Ready Unit, and Marine Reservists. The U.S. forces, meanwhile, employed their Forced Reconnaissance Platoon. Javier said amphibious raids are usually performed against the enemy. It is accomplished by employing a special force into an area that is controlled by enemy forces. Amphibious raids are commonly quick and swift, leaving minimal footprints on the ground. This year's Balikatan started April 11, and it's set to end on April 28. Meanwhile, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi opened the G7 foreign ministers meeting today, which will focus on the issues surrounding China's growing pressure on Taiwan and Russia's war in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Unity is now at the history starting point, so we will firmly reject any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or Russia's aggression against Ukraine, as well as its threat of use of nuclear weapons. By doing so, we will demonstrate to the world the G7 strong determination to uphold the international order-based rule.
Now, there is no shortage of challenges to discuss, but recent regional events are likely to sharpen the focus on Asia. The meeting comes days after China concluded major military drills around self-ruled Taiwan and after North Korea launched what it said was a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. Host Japan is keen to ensure regional challenges top the agenda and will emphasize its belief that Russia's invasion of Ukraine heightens the need for vigilance in Asia. The G7 has regularly warned China against attempts to seize Taiwan, and individual members have sounded the alarm in recent days. But there will be renewed focus on the grouping's language after recent comments by French President Emmanuel Macron, his insistence after a trip to Beijing that Europe should avoid crises that aren't ours, has raised eyebrows and ire among Paris's allies while delighting Chinese officials. Paris has worked to temper the reaction, insisting France's views have not changed, and most observers expect the group to reiterate previous positions warning China against changing the status quo by force.
You cannot sum up the relationship between France and Taiwan only about business. This is more stronger than this, and this is what we want to show again. More of never. I think this is very important for us to be here and just saying to all the people from Taiwan, we stand to you, we are close to you. The President Macron said what he wants to say, but from a pure European perspective with the attachment to build an autonomy strategic around Europe. But he still have the opportunity to go into details for the relationship between France and Taiwan, and nothing changed. That's what he said in La Haye.
Meanwhile, Myanmar's junta said today it would release more than 3,000 prisoners to mark the Buddhist New Year without specifying whether those jailed in its bloody crackdown on dissent would be freed. Junta Chief Min Aung Hlaing pardoned 3,015 prisoners to mark Myanmar New Year for the peaceful mind of the people and on humanitarian grounds, the junta's information team said in a statement. Those who re-offend would have to serve the remainder of their sentence with an additional penalty, according to the statement. It didn't say whether anti-junta protesters or journalists jailed covering the coup will be among those freed. The military has arrested thousands since its coup more than 2 years ago that plunged the country into turmoil and sparked widespread clashes with anti-coup fighters. Armed separatists ambushed a group of Indonesian soldiers searching for a kidnapped New Zealand pilot in the Papua region, killing at least one, according to the army. Indonesia's military says the group was scouring the remote hilly Niduga district on Saturday when gunmen opened fire, leaving at least one soldier dead. Take a look.
Satgas ini mencoba untuk menyisir mendekati posisi dari para penyandera. Kemudian ada serangan dari mereka, satu terjatuh di kedalaman 50 meter dan ketika mencoba untuk menolong mendapatkan serangan ulang. Kondisi lainnya masih dalam tahap pendalaman. Sekali lagi saya mohon.
Now, the soldiers were part of a group deployed to search for Philip Mark Mertens, a pilot for the Indonesian airline Susi Air who was kidnapped by the rebels at Niduga Airport in February. The West Papua National Liberation Army, or TPNPB, the military wing of Papua's main separatist group, claimed responsibility for the attack and said they had killed 9 soldiers. The rebels had previously demanded that Indonesia recognize Papuan independence in return for the pilot's release, as well as a meeting with President Joko Widodo facilitated by the international community. With a rise in COVID cases in Malaysia of late and more social gatherings for Hari Raya expected in the coming days, the public health experts there are suggesting that face masks be worn now in public. Public health expert Sharifa Ezzat Wan Puteh of University Kebangsaan, Malaysia, said that people who have not completed their vaccination regimen, either with primary or a booster, should be masked when in public. She also spoke about an upsurge in cases at certain schools, adding that students who are at risk should also wear masks. A statement from Malaysia's Health Ministry last Thursday said hospital admissions of people with COVID-19 had increased by 17.6% as at the beginning of April compared with the previous month. Health Minister Zaliha Mustafa said that among those hospitalized with COVID, 63.8% were age 60 and above, and 90.7% had comorbidities. Experts said the rise in cases is most likely due to the current strain being highly infectious. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health reported a spike in COVID cases in the past week as Vietnam recorded 183 new infections. It was also the highest number of daily cases recorded since the beginning of 2023, followed by 122 cases on April 8. Most new infections are in the northern region, with the highest figure in Hanoi. The Tan Nan Hospital in the capital city said that the number of its patients infected with COVID in April is already triple the amount from the whole of March, increasing from 25 to 75. The facility is providing treatment to 10 COVID patients. All of them are over 60 and have underlying health conditions. Meanwhile, in Thailand, the public is being cautioned about the risk of contracting the Omicron subvariant XBB.1.16 during the Songkran period, as the subvariant is believed to have caused a surge in COVID-19 cases in India. Now, experts are highlighting the risk of contracting the virus, especially during Songkran, when many people engage in water play and travel to visit relatives in the provinces. Now, Bangkok saw the huge water fights take place at close to 200 official sites, with smaller clashes breaking out in neighborhoods across the city. Residents welcome a return to normality after years of tough COVID-19 measures. Experts are reporting that between April 9 and 15, there were 435 new COVID cases admitted to hospitals for treatment, according to the Bangkok Post. Now, this was nearly 3 times higher than the prior week. 30 had lung infections and 19 were put on ventilation. Meanwhile, 2 people died. And to Indonesia now, where President Joko Widodo is urging all those joining the Aidilfitri exodus this week to complete their COVID-19 shots before leaving, following the discovery of 2 imported cases of the XBB.1.16, also known as Arcturus, an Omicron subvariant. With most travel restrictions lifted, some 120 million Indonesians are expected to hit the road to celebrate this event. This is likely the biggest wave since the start of the pandemic in 2020. The Jakarta Post is reporting that as of Thursday, 174 million Indonesians have completed their primary vaccinations, and 68 million have already received their first booster dose. Indonesia has seen a slight increase in its COVID caseload, reporting over 900 cases a day since Tuesday last week. In tonight's other news, Asia and the Pacific remains a dynamic region despite the somber backdrop of what looks to be shaping up as a challenging year for the world economy. However, the region still faces challenges from inflation, debt, and financial vulnerabilities. Take a look.
Going beyond China. Now, what does this mean? What does China's growth rebound mean for Asia Pacific? Here we have projected our growth for Asia Pacific to be 4.6% in 2023. This is a 0.3 percentage point higher than we expected last October. The ASEAN economies are expected to see growth decreasing from 5.7% in 2022 to 4.6% in 2023 due to a slight moderation in domestic demand momentum, monetary tightening, lower commodity prices, and weaker external demand from the US and Europe. Now, despite the solid growth outlook for Asia Pacific, policymakers in the region cannot be complacent. The region is still facing 4 significant policy challenges. What are those? Inflation. Inflation in the region is still above target. Core inflation remains sticky and has become a more important driver of headline inflation recently, which may lead to more persistent inflation and wage pressure. Output gaps for Asian economies are either closing or are already closed, and currency depreciation last year is still passing through to domestic prices. These factors suggest that the battle to contain inflation is not yet over, and yet monetary tightening has slowed down or paused in most countries in the region. Given the substantial inflation risk, we think monetary policy in the region may need to stay tighter for longer. Asian growth this year is expected to contribute 70% to global growth. So again, that's something which the inherent dynamism of Asia remains, but that does not mean that Asia is completely immune to what's happening elsewhere. So one has to be alert to what's happening elsewhere.
Now, what do these challenges mean for policymakers?
So as Asia faces these important challenges, we advise policymakers to stay vigilant. Policymakers should keep a close eye for financial stress and develop contingency plans. Unless strains increase and raise broad stability concerns, central banks should separate monetary policy objectives from financial stability goals. To do so, they should use available tools such as lending and discount facilities to ease any liquidity constraints in the banking sector, allowing them to keep policy rates tighter for longer until inflation falls durably back to target. In addition, fiscal consolidation may need to be more aggressive to ensure sustainability over the medium term. Policymakers must strike a balance between supporting growth, protecting the vulnerable, and addressing debt concerns. And finally, Asian economies must also prioritize policy initiatives that foster long-term growth. Structural reforms are needed to boost innovation and digitalization, accelerate the green transition, energy transition, and reduce risks from fragmentation and ensure food security.
Meanwhile, China Railways has announced that China to Laos international passenger services have begun running from April 13 with 1 train per day in each direction, making the border crossing. Take a look. Now, the Chinese state news agency Xinhua reported that the first train departed from Kunming South Railway Station for Vientiane yesterday at the auspicious time of 8 a.m., according to a report in the International Rail Journal. There will be one train running in each direction per day, and the total time of the journey will take 10.5 hours, including 2 short stops for customs checks. First-class tickets for the full journey are available for 760 yuan or $110, while second-class tickets are priced at 470 yuan or $68. The Laos-China Railway, which began construction in 2015 and marks the first extension of China's high-speed rail system into Southeast Asia, is a flagship of the Belt and Road Initiative in Southeast Asia. The 417-kilometer stretch includes 61 kilometers of bridges and 198 kilometers of tunnels. For most of history, the rolling emerald green hills of southern Yunnan and northern Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar formed an almost impenetrable barrier to outsiders, close to all but the most hardy settlers and traders, while the peoples that dwelt in these regions enjoyed virtual independence from the major lowland states. SpaceX is counting down to the first test flight Monday of Starship, the most powerful rocket ever built, designed to send astronauts to the moon and Mars and beyond. The giant rocket blasted off from Starbase's SpaceX spaceport in Boca Chica, Texas at 8 a.m. Central Time. Fallback times are scheduled for later in the week if Monday's launch attempt is delayed, something billionaire SpaceX founder Elon Musk said is a distinct possibility. Musk said he wanted to set expectations low because probably tomorrow will not be successful if by successful one means reaching orbit. Elon Musk is hoping to completely upend the rocket business with Starship. It's designed to be fully and rapidly reusable. He envisages flying people and satellites to orbit multiple times a day in the same way a jet airliner might crisscross the Atlantic. And finally, in our news, the Super Mario Bros. Movie retained the top spot in North America's box office 1 week after its epic debut, as Universal's popular game-themed animation again trounced all competitors, estimates showed Sunday. The joint effort of Universal, Nintendo, and Illumination Studios raked in $87 million in ticket sales in the Friday through Sunday period, bringing the movie's total haul to more than $347 million, according to exhibitor relations. The industry watcher had already predicted Super Mario, with its foundation in one of the most popular video games ever, will be the top movie of the year. Debuting in a very distant second place was Sony's Exorcist, starring Russell Crowe, which earned $9.1 million. This is a solid opening for a modestly budget original horror film, according to analyst David Gross. Third spot belonged to Lionsgate's neo-noir John Wick Chapter 4 with $7.9 million, bringing the thriller's 4-week North America total to $160 million. Keanu Reeves stars as the titular hitman who finds himself fighting an international crime group. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.